My name is Marcus Chin. I am 34 years old, and I work as a senior project manager for a construction company in Portland, Oregon. Most evenings, I sit in my downtown apartment on the 23rd floor, surrounded by blueprints that smell of fresh ink and budget reports that contain numbers large enough to build entire neighborhoods. I listen to the rain tap against floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook a city that never quite feels like home, even after 12 years of calling it that. The office towers below me pulse with light, each window representing someone else's life, someone else's family gathering for dinner around tables that actually seat more than one person. While they share stories about their day and pass plates of home-cooked food, I heat up another microwave meal and eat it standing at my kitchen counter, scrolling through emails that arrived after normal business hours. I have built a career on precision, on meeting deadlines that others consider impossible, on managing million-dollar projects that transform empty lots into places where real families will create real memories. Yet despite all this professional success, despite the corner office with my name etched on a brass nameplate and the salary that allows me to afford this expensive view, I cannot seem to manage the hollow feeling that settles in my chest every night when the city grows quiet. It is the feeling of being perpetually on the outside, watching life through glass that I can never quite break through. This particular Thursday evening in November, the rain was falling harder than usual, drumming against the windows with an urgency that matched my mood. I was reviewing contracts for a new residential development called Sunset Meadows, a neighborhood of 47 houses that would be home to families with children and dogs and backyard barbecues. I was calculating costs for playground equipment and wondering what it would have been like to grow up somewhere like that, when my phone buzzed against the mahogany desk my company had given me as a reward for exceeding sales targets 3 years running. The number was unfamiliar, but something about the area code made my stomach tighten with a recognition I could not quite place. It was 503, a Salem area code. Salem, Oregon, where my adoptive parents lived in the same house where I had spent 18 years trying to earn a love that never quite came. Where my 6-year-old niece Emma had been staying for the past 3 months while her mother, my adoptive sister Sarah, worked through what the family diplomatically called her health issues, but what everyone knew were addiction problems that had been spiraling for years. I almost let it go to voicemail. In my experience, calls from Salem rarely brought good news. But something, perhaps the lateness of the hour or the insistence of the ringing, made me pick up. The voice that came through the speaker was small and broken, barely above a whisper, and it made my heart stop completely. "Uncle Marcus? It's me, Emma." I immediately straightened in my chair, my hand gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. Emma never called me directly. She barely knew how to use a phone, and besides, she was supposed to be in the care of Robert and Linda, my adoptive parents who had stepped in to help when Sarah's life fell apart. They had made a big show of taking responsibility, telling everyone in the extended family how they were doing their duty as grandparents, how they would provide Emma with the stability her mother could not. "Emma? Sweetheart, what's wrong? Where are your grandparents?" The words came out faster than I intended, and I could hear the panic creeping into my voice. "I don't know," she said, and I could hear her trying not to cry, that particular sound children make when they are fighting to be brave but losing the battle. "They left this morning after breakfast and they haven't come back. I've been waiting all day. I'm so hungry, Uncle Marcus. My tummy hurts, and it's getting dark outside and all the lights in the other houses are on. But they're not here." My blood ran cold, and I felt that familiar surge of protective rage that had defined so much of my childhood. The rage that came from being the one who cared too much in a family that seemed incapable of caring enough. I glanced at the clock on my laptop screen, its blue digits glowing in the darkening office. It was nearly 8 o'clock, which meant Emma had been alone for almost 12 hours. "Emma, honey, are you alone in the house right now? Is anyone else there with you?" "Yes, I'm by myself. I waited for them all day, just like Grandpa said. I was a good girl. I watched cartoons and I colored pictures and I even tried to clean up my toys. I ate the last crackers for lunch, but there's nothing else in the kitchen. I looked everywhere. The refrigerator is empty except for Grandpa's beer bottles and some old Chinese food that smells bad. I was already grabbing my keys from the desk drawer, my jacket from the back of my chair, my wallet from the top of the filing cabinet. My hands were moving with the efficiency of someone accustomed to emergency situations, but my mind was reeling with disbelief and fury. They had left a 6-year-old child alone all day without food, without any way to contact them, without even a neighbor to check on her. "I'm coming to get you right now, okay? Can you stay on the phone with me while I drive?" "Okay." Her voice was so small, so scared, and it reminded me of my own voice at that age, calling out into empty hallways and getting no response. "Uncle Marcus? Why did they leave me? Did I do something bad?" That question hit me like a punch to the gut, because I knew exactly how she felt. I had asked myself that same question 1,000 times growing up. Why was I always the one left behind when the family took trips to visit relatives? Why was I never invited to the special dinners or the private conversations? Why was I never quite enough to earn the love that seemed to flow so easily to everyone else in the family? "No, sweetheart, you didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes grown-ups make bad choices, but that's never because of anything you did. You're perfect just the way you are. Okay? Okay?" she whispered, and I could hear her settling back against what sounded like couch cushions. "I drew you a picture today. It's of our whole family, but I made you the biggest because you're my favorite uncle." "I'm your only uncle, sweetheart," I said, navigating through Portland traffic with one hand while holding the phone with the other, trying to keep my voice light despite the rage building in my chest like a storm. "That's what makes you the best one. And you always answer your phone when I need you." The drive from Portland to Salem usually took an hour in good weather, but I made it in 45 minutes. My hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white and my shoulders ached with tension. Emma stayed on the phone the entire time, her small voice describing how she had spent the day drawing pictures and watching cartoons, waiting for Grandma and Grandpa to come home with groceries like they had promised. "I made them pictures too," she said as I turned onto the familiar street where I had grown up, lined with modest ranch houses and carefully maintained lawns. "I drew Grandma cooking pancakes and Grandpa reading the newspaper. I thought maybe they would put them on the refrigerator like Mama used to do before she got sick." "I'm sure they're beautiful pictures, Emma. Do you think they forgot about me, Uncle Marcus? Sometimes I think maybe I'm too quiet and people don't notice I'm there." The pain in her voice was almost unbearable, because it was the same pain I had carried for so many years. The pain of feeling invisible, of believing that your very existence was somehow forgettable. "I notice you, sweetheart. I always notice you, and I would never, ever forget about you." The house at 1247 Maple Street looked exactly as it had when I left it 16 years ago, except smaller somehow, as if my childhood memories had inflated its actual size. The ranch-style home with its brown siding and white shutters sat in the middle of a perfectly manicured lawn that Robert spent every Saturday morning tending. There was a small front porch with 2 chairs that Linda had never sat in, and a driveway where my adoptive father's truck should have been parked but was not. The house was dark except for the flickering light of the television in the living room, casting blue shadows against the closed curtains. I had my own key from years ago, back when Robert and Linda still made token efforts to include me in family gatherings, before they had given up the pretense that I was anything more than an obligation they had taken on in a moment of misguided charity. I found Emma curled up on the old brown couch that had been there since my childhood, clutching a stuffed rabbit that looked like it had seen better days. Her small legs were tucked underneath her, and she was wearing a pink dress that was clearly too big for her tiny frame, the sleeves falling past her wrists and the hem pooling around her ankles. Her feet were bare, and I could see that her hair had not been brushed properly in days. When she saw me, her face transformed in a way that both warmed my heart and broke it. Her eyes, which had been heavy with exhaustion and worry, suddenly blazed with relief and joy. She scrambled off the couch and ran to me with arms outstretched, and I scooped her up, feeling how light she was, how fragile, how much smaller than a 6-year-old should feel. "I knew you would come," she whispered against my shoulder. Her small arms wrapped around my neck with a fierceness that suggested she had no intention of letting go. "You always keep your promises. You're the only one who always keeps your promises." I carried her to the kitchen, and what I found there made my hands shake with anger. The refrigerator contained nothing but beer, condiments that were months past their expiration dates, and moldy leftovers in containers that should have been thrown away weeks ago. The pantry had a few cans of soup, some stale crackers, and a box of cereal that was nearly empty. This was not the home of people who had prepared to care for a child. This was not the home of grandparents who had stepped up to provide love and stability. This was the home of people who had taken on a responsibility they had no intention of fulfilling properly. In the sink were dishes that had been sitting there for days, and I could see fruit flies buzzing around a banana that had turned completely black. The counters were cluttered with mail, empty bottles, and the detritus of people who were living day to day without any thought for the small person who depended on them. "Are you hungry, sweetheart?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from the way she was leaning against me, her small body lacking the energy that should have defined a 6-year-old. "Yes, but I don't want to be trouble. Grandpa says I eat too much and food costs money." That comment nearly undid me. Robert had actually told this innocent child that she was a burden, that her basic need for food was somehow excessive. I thought about my own childhood, about the times I had gone to bed hungry because Linda had not bothered to prepare dinner, about the way they had made me feel guilty for needing lunch money for school. I heated up some soup and made Emma a peanut butter sandwich from ingredients I found buried in the back of the pantry, checking expiration dates and hoping nothing would make her sick. She ate like she had not seen food in days, which I suspected might actually be the case, and between bites she told me about her day. "Where did Grandma and Grandpa go?" I asked gently, sitting beside her at the kitchen table that was still covered with the same yellow tablecloth from my childhood, now stained and fraying at the edges. Emma shrugged, her small shoulders barely visible beneath the oversized dress. "Grandpa said they had to go visit someone important for business. He said I should be a good girl and watch TV until they got back. He said they might be gone for a while, but not to worry. That was this morning when I was still sleepy and eating my cereal. Did they leave you a phone number? Did they say when they'd be back?" "No. Grandpa just said to be good and not to answer the door if anyone came. But I got scared when it got dark and they still weren't here. I remembered your number because you made me practice it that time when Mama was in the hospital. They had left a 6-year-old child alone for an entire day. No food prepared, no neighbor notified, no backup plan. Just abandoned her like she was an inconvenience they could ignore, hoping that somehow everything would work out without their involvement." As Emma finished eating, I walked through the house, and every room confirmed what I already suspected. This was not a temporary lapse in judgment. This was a pattern of neglect that had probably been building for weeks. Emma's few belongings were scattered throughout the house, uncared for and disorganized. Her clothes were in a laundry basket that had never made it to her room, many of them dirty and in need of washing. Her small bed in the guest room had not been made in days, and the sheets were tangled and stained. There were no books on the nightstand, no toys organized in any meaningful way, no evidence that anyone had bothered to create a space where a little girl could feel safe and loved. In the living room, I found a stack of mail on the coffee table that had been accumulating for weeks. Bills, mostly, and advertisements, but among them was something that made my blood run cold. It was a letter addressed to me in my adoptive mother's handwriting, but the envelope had never been mailed. It was dated 3 weeks ago, and my name was written in the careful script that Linda had always used for important occasions. I opened it while Emma dozed against my shoulder, exhausted from her day of waiting and worry. "Marcus," the letter began, "we need you to take Emma as soon as possible. This arrangement is not working out the way we hoped. She requires constant attention and supervision, and we are not equipped to handle a child at our age. We thought we could manage, but we were wrong. Please come get her at your earliest convenience." 3 weeks. They had written this letter 3 weeks ago, but had never bothered to send it. Instead, they had just started leaving her alone for longer and longer periods, hoping that someone else would step in and solve their problem, hoping that I would somehow sense that I was needed and come running to clean up another mess that the family had created but could not handle. Which, of course, I had, because that was the role I had always played in this family. The responsible one, the one who fixed things, the one who could be counted on to sacrifice his own comfort for the needs of others. I tucked the letter into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone to call Robert's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail, his voice cheerful and unconcerned. "You've reached Bob Chin. Leave a message and I'll get back to you when I can." Linda's phone did the same, and I tried their landline with growing frustration. After 6 rings, Robert finally answered, and I could immediately hear that I was interrupting something pleasant. "Marcus? What are you doing calling so late? Is everything all right?" In the background, I could hear music and laughter, the sound of people having a good time. Glasses clinking, conversation flowing, the unmistakable atmosphere of a party or restaurant. They were out enjoying themselves while their 6-year-old granddaughter sat alone in a dark house, hungry and scared. "I'm at your house with Emma. She called me crying and hungry because you left her alone all day." There was a pause, and I could hear Robert covering the phone and saying something to someone nearby. When he came back, his voice had that casual, dismissive tone that I remembered from countless childhood disappointments. "Oh, that. Well, we had to attend Linda's sister's anniversary dinner. It was important family business, you know how these things are. We couldn't possibly miss it." "Emma is family too," I said through gritted teeth, pacing the living room while Emma slept on the couch. "Well, yes, of course she is, but these things come up unexpectedly. It was a last-minute invitation, and we couldn't find a babysitter on such short notice. She's fine though, isn't she? She's a good kid, very independent for her age. We figured she could handle a few hours on her own." "A few hours? Robert, it's been 12 hours. 12 hours. She's 6 years old, and you left her alone with no food for an entire day." "There was food. I saw crackers in the pantry just yesterday. And soup, I think. She's perfectly capable of making herself a snack." I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to wherever they were and show them exactly what I thought of their idea of childcare, of their casual dismissal of a child's basic needs. Instead, I took a deep breath and tried to stay calm for Emma's sake, knowing that my anger would accomplish nothing except to give them another reason to write me off as the overly dramatic adopted son who never understood how real families worked. "I'm taking her home with me," I said, my voice steady despite the rage coursing through my veins. Good. That's probably for the best anyway. We were going to call you tomorrow about making some changes to this arrangement. It's been more challenging than we anticipated." "What do you mean, changes?" "Well, to be honest, this whole situation isn't really working out. Emma needs more attention than we can provide at our age. We thought we could handle it, but children are so much work these days. They require constant supervision and entertainment. It's exhausting, and that was it. No apology. No concern for Emma's well-being or emotional state. No acknowledgement that they had failed a child who had trusted them to provide basic care and protection. Just relief that someone else would step in to clean up their mess, allowing them to return to their comfortable, child-free existence without any consequences for their neglect. After I hung up, I sat in their living room, holding my sleeping niece and thinking about all the times I had sat in this same spot as a child, waiting for someone to care about me the way I cared about others. Waiting for someone to choose me first, instead of abandoning me whenever something more interesting or convenient came along. I remember being 7 years old, standing in this exact living room on Father's Day, wearing my best button-down shirt that Linda had bought for me at Goodwill and holding a handmade card that I had spent hours creating. I had drawn a picture of Robert and me playing catch in the backyard, even though we had never actually played catch together. I had written "World's Best Dad" in my most careful cursive, practicing the letters over and over until they were perfect. When I presented it to him, Robert barely glanced at it before setting it aside on the coffee table and returning to his conversation with my adoptive brother Eric about Eric's Little League season. Eric was 2 years younger than me but had always been the natural athlete, the one who made Robert's face light up with pride when he talked about batting averages and stolen bases. "That's nice, Marcus," Robert had said without looking at me again. Very creative. Later that evening, after Eric had gone to bed and I was supposed to be asleep, I crept back to the living room to see if my card was still on the coffee table. I found it in the trash can, crumpled up and buried under newspaper and coffee grounds, as if it had never mattered at all. That night, I lay in my small room listening to Robert and Linda talking in their bedroom across the hall, their voices carrying through the thin walls of the ranch house. "He tries too hard," Linda was saying. "It's not natural, all that neediness. He'll grow out of it," Robert replied. "Some kids just take longer to find their place. But I never did find my place in that house. I learned instead to take up less space, to need less attention, to be grateful for whatever scraps of affection came my way. I learned that love was something you earned through perfect behavior and straight A's and never asking for too much. But Emma was different. Emma saw me as her hero, her protector, the uncle who always kept his promises. And I would never, ever let her feel the way they had made me feel. I would never let her believe that she was too much, that her needs were inconvenient, that her love was something to be tolerated rather than treasured. I carried her out to my car, bundling her in my winter jacket because the November night had grown cold and she was still wearing that too-big dress with no sweater. She woke up briefly as I buckled her into the back seat using a booster seat I had purchased months ago, hoping someday I might have the chance to take her somewhere special. "Are we going to your house?" she asked sleepily, her small hand reaching for mine. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going home. Will I have my own room?" "You'll have whatever you want. We'll make it perfect just for you." She smiled and closed her eyes again, trust radiating from her small form. "I love you, Uncle Marcus. You're the best grown-up in the whole world." "I love you too, Emma. More than you could ever know." As I drove back toward Portland through the dark November night, I thought about the letter in my pocket and the decision that lay ahead of me. I could file for emergency custody, fight for the right to raise Emma myself. It would mean changing my entire life, transforming my quiet apartment into a home suitable for a child, learning how to be the parent I had never had. Or I could find her a proper foster family, people who actually wanted children and knew how to care for them, people with experience raising kids, people who would not see her as a burden or an obligation but as a gift to be cherished. But as I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw her small face peaceful in sleep, I knew there was really no choice at all. She needed someone who understood what it felt like to be unwanted, someone who would fight for her the way no one had ever fought for me. She needed someone who would see her late-night phone calls not as interruptions but as invitations to be exactly the kind of family member she deserved. The next morning, Emma woke up in the guest bed of my apartment, sunlight streaming through windows that faced east toward Mount Hood. I had spent the night on the couch, getting up every hour to check on her, making sure she was warm enough, safe enough, loved enough. I made her pancakes from scratch, the kind with chocolate chips that I remembered wanting as a child but never receiving. I let her choose whatever she wanted to watch on television, and we spent the morning on the couch with her curled against my side, her small body finally relaxed and trusting. "Uncle Marcus," she said as she finished her second helping of pancakes, "why didn't Grandma and Grandpa want me?" I set down my coffee cup and looked at this beautiful, innocent little girl who was asking the same question I had asked myself for 27 years. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that some people are incapable of love? How do you help a child understand that their worth is not determined by other people's inability to see it? "Sometimes adults make mistakes," I said carefully, choosing my words like I was defusing a bomb. "Sometimes they don't know how to love the way they should. But that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. Do you understand that? You are perfect exactly as you are." She nodded solemnly, her small face serious with the weight of trying to understand adult failures. "Is that what happened to you when you were little?" The question surprised me with its perceptiveness. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Mama told me that Grandma and Grandpa adopted you when you were a baby, but they never loved you as much as they loved Uncle Eric and her. She said that's why you live so far away and only visit on holidays. She said you never felt like you really belonged with them." Sarah had told her daughter this. My adoptive sister, who had battled addiction and made countless destructive choices, but still received unconditional support from our parents, had explained to her 6-year-old that I was the unwanted one, the one who had never quite fit into the family picture. "Your mama talks too much sometimes," I said gently, not wanting to criticize Sarah in front of Emma but also not wanting to lie. But yes, it was difficult sometimes, feeling like I didn't quite belong anywhere. "Well, I think you belong with me," Emma said matter-of-factly, as if she were stating an obvious truth that adults had somehow overlooked. "And I belong with you. We can be a family of 2 people. That's still a real family, right? The realest kind," I said, and meant it. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in a family court waiting room, wearing my best charcoal suit and holding a manila folder full of documents that would hopefully convince a judge that I could provide a stable, loving home for Emma. I had letters of recommendation from colleagues who had seen me manage complex projects under pressure. I had financial statements proving I could more than support a child, including a college fund I had already started. I had a home study report from a social worker who had visited my apartment twice and declared it not only suitable but ideal for a child. What I did not have was support from Robert and Linda. They had agreed to surrender custody without a fight, but they made it clear they thought I was making a terrible mistake. "You don't know anything about raising children," Linda had said when I called to inform them of my decision. "You've never even been married. You don't understand what it takes to be responsible for another person day in and day out. Neither had you when you adopted me," I pointed out, remembering how young they had been, how unprepared for the reality of parenthood. That was different. We were younger then, more optimistic about these situations. We thought we could make a difference. These situations, as if love and commitment were experiments that could be abandoned when they became inconvenient, when they required more effort than anticipated. "Besides," Linda continued, "Emma needs a mother figure. She needs stability and routine, things a single man cannot provide." But as I sat in that courtroom and listened to the family court judge review my petition for custody, I felt something I had never experienced before. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. This was not about proving something to Robert and Linda, or about showing them that I could succeed where they had failed. This was about giving Emma the childhood I had never had, the unconditional love I had never received. Emma had been waiting in the hallway with a court-appointed social worker, but when she saw me emerge from the courtroom, she ran to me with that same bright smile she had given me the night I rescued her from the empty house. "Did you win?" she asked, her small hands gripping my jacket. "We both won," I said, lifting her up so we were eye to eye. "We're officially a family now, forever and always." That evening, as I helped Emma unpack the few belongings I had collected from Robert and Linda's house, she pulled something from the bottom of her small suitcase that made my breath catch in my throat. It was a wooden box, no bigger than a shoebox, with intricate carvings around the edges. "What's that, sweetheart?" "It's Great-Grandpa Joe's treasure box. He gave it to me before he went to heaven. He said there were important things inside that I should keep safe until the right time." Grandpa Joe had been Robert's father, Emma's great-grandfather, and the only person in the family who had ever treated me like I truly belonged. When everyone else was focused on Eric's football games or Sarah's latest crisis, Grandpa Joe would seek me out, asking about my schoolwork, my dreams, my thoughts about the world. He had died 2 years earlier, when Emma was only 4, but he had always been special to her too. Inside the box was a collection of items that told the story of a man who had seen and understood more than he had ever let on. There was a photo of me and Emma taken at last Christmas, where we were building a snowman in my parents' backyard while everyone else stayed inside. There were drawings Emma had made over the years, all featuring me prominently, all carefully preserved. And at the bottom of the box was something that made my hands tremble with emotion. It was a letter, written in Grandpa Joe's shaky handwriting, addressed to me and dated just weeks before his death. "Marcus," it began, "if you are reading this, then my time has come and gone, and I hope this letter finds its way to you through Emma, who I know will keep it safe until you need it most." The letter went on to explain that Grandpa Joe had always seen how differently I was treated by Robert and Linda, and how much it had bothered him throughout the years. He wrote about conversations he had tried to have with them, encouraging them to treat all their children equally, to see past their biological prejudices and embrace me as fully as they had embraced Eric and Sarah. "But they never listened," the letter continued. "They were too young when they adopted you, too unprepared for what it really meant to love a child who did not share their DNA. They meant well, but meaning well is not enough when it comes to raising children. Children need to feel wanted, not just tolerated." My vision blurred as I read the next paragraph, the words swimming on the page as tears threatened to fall. "The truth is, you were never just an adopted grandchild to me. You were the grandson I was meant to have, the one who asked questions and listened to answers, who cared about other people's feelings and tried to make everyone around you happy. And I want you to know something that Robert and Linda never bothered to tell you, something I learned years after you graduated high school." I had to set the letter down for a moment, my hands shaking too much to hold it steady. Emma noticed my distress and climbed into my lap, her small arms wrapping around my waist. "It's okay, Uncle Marcus. Great-Grandpa Joe said the letter might make you sad at first, but then it would make you happy. He said it was full of important secrets that you deserved to know." I picked up the letter again and continued reading, my heart pounding with anticipation. "Your birth mother didn't abandon you because she didn't love you, Marcus. She was 16 years old and scared, and she chose adoption because she wanted you to have opportunities she couldn't provide. She specifically requested that you go to a family who would love you as their own, and she wrote letters to you every year on your birthday for the first 10 years of your life." I stopped breathing. Letters. My birth mother had written me letters. Letters that Robert and Linda received and never gave to you, the letter continued. "I found them in Robert's desk after you graduated high school, hidden away like guilty secrets. I confronted them about it, but they said they were protecting you from confusion, from wanting things they couldn't provide. I kept copies, hoping someday I could give them to you myself, but my health has been failing, and I worry that opportunity will never come. At the bottom of the letter was an address and detailed instructions. If you are reading this, those letters are waiting for you in my safety deposit box at Salem First Bank. The key is taped under the top drawer of the desk in my old room, which I suspect Emma is using now. Box number 247. You have always deserved to know how much you were wanted, Marcus. Don't let them convince you otherwise. I sat on Emma's bed, holding this letter that had been waiting for 2 years to find its way to me, and I felt something shift inside my chest. For my entire life, I had carried the weight of believing I was unwanted, that my birth mother had given me up because I was somehow defective or burdensome. Great-Grandpa Joe said you might cry when you read it, Emma said quietly, her small hand patting my arm with the gentle competence of someone far older than 6. He said crying was okay because sometimes happy secrets make people cry. How long have you had this box, sweetheart? Since he went to heaven. Mama was going to throw away all his stuff, but I hid the box in my closet. Great-Grandpa Joe told me it was my job to keep his treasures safe until you needed them. He said you were special and that I should always take care of you because you take care of everyone else. The next Saturday, Emma and I made the drive to Salem, but not to visit Robert and Linda. We went to Salem First Bank, where a kind elderly teller helped us access box 247 with the key Emma had hidden in her treasure box for 2 years. Inside were dozens of letters, all addressed to me in careful handwriting that grew more confident and mature over the years. Letters from a teenage mother who became a young woman, then a wife, then a mother to other children, but who never forgot the baby boy she had placed for adoption with people she trusted to love him. I read them all, right there in the privacy of the bank's small room while Emma colored in a workbook she had brought along. Letters describing my birth mother's hopes for my life, her dreams that I was happy and healthy and surrounded by people who cherished me. Letters apologizing for the choice she had made, but also explaining the love behind it. The careful consideration that had gone into selecting adoptive parents who seemed kind and stable and eager to welcome a child into their home. She wrote about her own life as it unfolded, finishing high school, going to college, meeting the man who would become her husband. She wrote about her other children and how she told them about their big brother who lived far away, how she wondered if I had their same laugh or their love of books. The last letter was dated 10 years ago, when I would have been 24 and just starting my career in Portland. Marcus, it said, I don't know if you'll ever read these words, but I need you to know that not a day goes by that I don't think about you. I have 3 other children now, but you were my first baby, my first love, and there will always be a place in my heart that belongs only to you. If you ever want to find me, if you ever have questions about where you came from or why I made the choices I did, I will be waiting. I will always be waiting. There was a phone number at the bottom of the letter and an address in Eugene, Oregon. Contact information that was probably outdated after 10 years, but maybe, just maybe, might still reach the woman who had given me life and then spent decades wondering what had become of me. When I emerged from the bank, Emma looked up from her coloring book and smiled that radiant smile that had become the center of my world. Did Great-Grandpa Joe's surprise make you happy? Yes, sweetheart. It made me very happy. Good. He said it would. He said you needed to know that lots of people love you, even if some people forget how to show it properly. That night, after Emma was asleep in her new bedroom that we had decorated together with purple walls and glow-in-the-dark stars, I sat at my kitchen table and dialed the phone number from the last letter. My hands were shaking, and I had to dial twice because I misdialed the first time. It rang 4 times, and then a woman's voice answered, warm and slightly tired, as if she had been settling in for the evening. Hello. Hi, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My name is Marcus Chen. I think, I think you might be my birth mother." There was silence for a long moment, so complete that I wondered if the call had dropped. Then I heard a sound that was part sob, part laugh, part pure joy, and I knew that I had found my way home to a love that had never stopped existing. "Marcus? Oh my God. Marcus, is it really you? I've been waiting for this call for 26 years." Her name was Jennifer Walsh, and she lived in Eugene, just 2 hours south of Portland. She was married to a man named David, a high school history teacher, and they had 3 children together: Michael, who was 22 and in college, Sarah, who was 19 and studying nursing, and Danny, who was 16 and played basketball just like I had in high school. We talked for 4 hours that night, until Emma woke up from a bad dream and needed me to read her a story. Jennifer understood immediately when I had to cut our conversation short, and her voice was warm with approval when I explained that I was now Emma's legal guardian. "You sound exactly like the kind of father I hoped you would become," she said. "Patient and loving and willing to put a child's needs first. She's lucky to have you." "We're lucky to have each other," I said, and I meant it completely. Over the next several weeks, Jennifer and I talked regularly, slowly building the relationship that Robert and Linda had stolen from us. I learned that she had tried to contact me when I turned 18, but Robert and Linda had refused to provide any information. They had told the adoption agency that I was not interested in contact and that any attempts to reach me would be unwelcome and disruptive. They had lied to her about my feelings just as they had lied to me about hers, stealing 26 years of connection that could have changed everything about how I understood myself and my place in the world. But Jennifer had never given up hope. She had kept every address I had ever lived at, following my life from a distance through social media and public records. She knew about my job, my apartment, even the construction projects I had managed. She had been proud of me from afar, celebrating my successes in silence and worrying about me during the times when my online presence suggested I was struggling. "I always knew you were special," she told me during one of our late-night phone calls. "Even when you were a baby, you had this intensity about you, this way of looking at the world like you were trying to understand everything at once. I could tell you were going to be someone who cared deeply about things." 2 months after that first phone call, Jennifer came to Portland to meet Emma and see the life I had built. She brought David and their youngest son Danny, and she cried when she saw how Emma clung to me like I was her anchor in the world. "You're exactly the kind of father I hoped you would become when I was 16 and scared and trying to imagine what your life might look like," she said as we watched Emma and Danny play together at the park near my apartment. "Kind and patient and devoted. She's so lucky to have you, and you're lucky to have her. For the first time in my life, I feel like I understand what family really means," I said, watching Emma show Danny how to properly push someone on a swing. Jennifer nodded, her eyes bright with tears that seemed to be equal parts joy and regret. "It's not about blood or adoption papers or who raised you. It's about who chooses to stay, who chooses to love you even when it's difficult, who chooses to put your needs above their own comfort." Emma had been right that first night when she said we could be a family of 2 people. But as I watched her playing with my half-brother Danny, as I saw how naturally she fit into this new extended family, I realized that our family was growing in ways I had never imagined possible. That evening, as Jennifer prepared to drive back to Eugene, she handed me one more letter, this one sealed and yellowed with age. "I wrote this the day after you were born," she said. "I always planned to give it to you when you were old enough to understand what it meant." I opened it later, after Emma was asleep and the apartment was quiet except for the distant sound of Portland traffic. "My beautiful baby boy," it began. "Today I placed you in the arms of people who promised to love you as their own, and my heart is breaking even though I know this is the right choice. I want you to know that you are not unwanted. You are not a mistake. You are not a burden that I am eager to pass off to someone else. The letter continued with words that would have changed everything about my childhood if I had been allowed to read them. You are a gift I could not keep but could never forget. You are a love story that begins with sacrifice and ends with hope. You are proof that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go, trusting that somewhere in the world, there are people who will cherish what I could not provide at 16. If you ever doubt your worth, if you ever feel like you don't belong anywhere, remember this. You were wanted from the moment you took your first breath. You were planned for, hoped for, dreamed about by a teenage girl who loved you enough to choose your happiness over her own comfort. Be kind, be strong, be the man I know you can become. And if the family who raised you ever makes you feel less than precious, remember that your first family, the one you grew inside for 9 months, knew exactly how valuable you were. As I finished reading, I felt something shift inside my chest, like a door that had been locked for 34 years finally opening. For my entire life, I had carried the weight of feeling unwanted, of believing that love was something I had to earn through perfect behavior and endless giving. But Emma had shown me a different kind of love, the kind that exists simply because it exists without conditions or requirements. And Jennifer had shown me that I had been loved long before I ever understood what love meant. The next morning was a Saturday, and Emma and I had developed a routine of making pancakes together and planning our weekend adventures. As she stood on a chair at the kitchen counter, helping me measure flour and crack eggs, she looked up at me with syrup already on her chin and happiness shining in her eyes. "Uncle Marcus, are you sad anymore about not having a real family?" I smiled and wiped the syrup from her face with a damp towel, thinking about how to answer a question that had become so much more complex over the past few months. "What makes you think I don't have a real family now?" "Well, you do now," she said matter-of-factly, as if she were stating something obvious that adults had somehow overlooked. "You have me and I have you, and we have Jennifer and David and Danny and Michael and Sarah. That's a lot of family for people who used to be lonely." "It certainly is. But what about before? When it was just you and you felt sad about not belonging anywhere?" I thought about her question as I flipped pancakes and watched steam rise from the griddle, considering how much truth a 6-year-old could handle about the nature of love and belonging. "I think maybe I was looking for family in the wrong places," I said finally. "I thought family meant the people who were supposed to love me automatically, instead of the people who chose to love me deliberately." "What's the difference?" "The difference is that supposed to love comes with rules and expectations and conditions, but chose to love just comes from the heart, and it stays there no matter what." Emma nodded solemnly, as if this made perfect sense to her 6-year-old understanding of the world. "I choose to love you every day," she said. "Even when you make me eat vegetables with dinner. Even when you leave your toys all over the living room. Even then. That's what families do. They love each other even when they're messy." That afternoon, I called Robert and Linda for the first time since the custody hearing. Linda answered, and her voice was cool and formal when she recognized mine, as if I were a business acquaintance rather than someone she had raised for 18 years. "Marcus, how are things going with Emma?" "They're going very well. She's happy and healthy and doing great in her new school. She's made friends and she loves her teacher." "That's nice. I'm sure it's quite an adjustment for you, having to structure your life around a child's needs." "It has been an adjustment, but a good one, the best one I've ever made." I paused, choosing my words carefully because I knew this conversation would probably be our last. "I called because I wanted you to know that I found the letters." "What letters?" But I could hear in her voice that she knew exactly what letters I meant. "The letters from my birth mother. The ones you kept from me for over 20 years. The ones Grandpa Joe saved copies of before he died." There was a long silence, and I could picture Linda sitting at her kitchen table, calculating how much she wanted to admit and how much she could still deny. "Marcus, we did what we thought was best for you at the time. Those letters would have just confused you and made you want things we couldn't provide. They would have made you dissatisfied with your life. They would have shown me that I was wanted. They would have shown me that someone in the world thought about me every day and loved me without conditions. We loved you," Linda said, but her voice lacked conviction, as if she were reciting words she did not quite believe. "No," I said gently, not with anger but with the calm certainty of someone who had finally learned the difference. "You provided for me. You gave me food and shelter and education, and I'm grateful for those things. But love is different. Love doesn't keep score of how much attention it gives to each child. Love doesn't make one child wait while other children get praised first. Love doesn't hide letters that would bring comfort to a lonely child who spent years wondering why he wasn't enough. I don't know what you want me to say. I don't want you to say anything. I just wanted you to know that Emma and I are building something different, something better. And I wanted to thank you. Thank us." She sounded genuinely surprised. "For showing me exactly the kind of parent I never want to be. For teaching me that love without conditions is possible, even if you couldn't provide it yourselves." I hung up before she could respond, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt completely free from the weight of seeking their approval or understanding. That evening, Emma and I sat on the couch reading books together before bedtime. She was curled against my side, her small hand resting on my arm, and I thought about all the lonely nights I had spent in this apartment before she came into my life. All the microwave dinners eaten standing up, all the weekends that stretched empty and purposeless. "Uncle Marcus," she said sleepily, "do you think my mama will ever get better and want me back?" It was a question I had been dreading because I knew that Sarah's recovery was uncertain at best, and I also knew that Emma deserved an honest answer that would not destroy her hope or her sense of security. "I think your mama loves you very much," I said carefully, stroking her hair as she settled more deeply against me. "But sometimes love isn't enough if someone isn't healthy enough to take care of themselves, let alone a little girl who deserves the best of everything. What I can promise you is that no matter what happens with your mama, you will always have a home with me. Always. Even when I'm grown up and maybe married with my own kids, even then. This is your home for as long as you want it to be, and you're my family forever." Emma smiled and nestled closer, her breathing already deepening towards sleep. "I want it to be forever and always. I want to be your family until I'm old and you're old and we're both too old to remember our own names. Then forever and always it is." As she drifted off to sleep, I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment. A desperate phone call from a scared little girl had changed both of our lives in ways neither of us could have predicted when she dialed my number on that dark November night. It had forced me to confront the patterns of neglect and emotional abandonment that had shaped my childhood, and it had given me the opportunity to break those patterns for the next generation. I had spent 34 years believing that I was fundamentally unlovable, that there was something wrong with me that made it impossible for Robert and Linda to care about me the way they cared about their biological children. But Emma had shown me that love is not about perfection or worthiness or earning your place through good behavior. It is about showing up consistently, about choosing someone again and again, about making them feel safe and valued and seen for exactly who they are. 6 months after that first phone call, Emma and I moved into a larger apartment with 2 bedrooms and a small balcony where she could grow flowers in pots. We established new traditions that became the foundation of our life together. Saturday morning pancakes with chocolate chips, Sunday afternoon visits with Jennifer's family in Eugene, bedtime stories that always ended with me telling her how grateful I was that she had chosen me to be her uncle and guardian. On the anniversary of the night she called me crying and hungry, we made a chocolate cake together and celebrated what Emma called Family Day, the day we officially became each other's person. She blew out 7 candles, one for each year of her life and one for luck, and made a wish that she whispered in my ear with the seriousness of someone sharing state secrets. I wished that all the kids who feel lonely like we used to feel could find their perfect family too, she said. I wished that everyone could have someone who answers their phone when they're scared. As I tucked her into bed that night, I realized that her wish was already coming true in ways she could not even understand. We had found each other across the wreckage of abandonment and neglect, and we had built something beautiful and strong from the pieces of our broken beginnings. The little girl who had once been left alone and hungry had taught me that family is not a destination you arrive at through birth or adoption papers. It is a choice you make every single day, a commitment you renew every morning when you wake up and decide to love someone completely, regardless of how difficult or inconvenient or demanding that love might become. And every morning when I wake up to Emma's laughter echoing through our home, when I see her backpack by the door and her drawings on the refrigerator and her small shoes lined up next to mine, I choose her again. Just as she chose me on that stormy night when she picked up the phone and called the one person she trusted to come for her, no matter what. Some stories begin with loss, with abandonment, with the terrible weight of feeling unwanted. But this story began with a phone call that led us both home to the love we had been searching for our entire lives. It began with a little girl who was brave enough to ask for help and an uncle who was finally ready to become the family member he had always wanted to be. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Before you go, I have left 2 more stories here on your screen. Both from men who discovered that family is not always who you are born to, it is who stands by you when the truth comes out. Click on whichever one calls to you. And if you want to join our community of people who understand what it is like to be the outsider looking in, that notification bell is your invitation. Until tomorrow, remember your story matters even if they tried to erase it.